Hello, 'tis I, Fat Cow. Well, that was over quickly, wasn't it? Was Salah cheating? Was he not? Has Foodie manipulated him in doing something that he didn't want to do? Has she not? Have they both realised that nobody actually gives a shit whether Salah is cheating or not, because we don't consider their relationship genuine? Well, only time will tell. Well, it transpires that I actually have some experience in this matter. Had it been genuine, that I can give forth to maybe shed some light on some things about the dynamics between a husband and wife in the Middle East. Now, first, I'd like to stress this is my personal experience, and my personal experience involving one other individual, a man from the Middle East who happened to be a Muslim, and his mother, actually. So I'm not speaking about all Middle Eastern men, I'm not speaking about all Muslim men, but I want to stress this, and I want to stress this very, very strongly. I am of the opinion that these beliefs are purely cultural and have very little, if anything, to do with the religion of Islam. Anyway, I need to go back. I was married in the Middle East, in a courthouse, by the way, and my papers were stamped. The stamp is kind of a purple colour, by the way, and circular, and also, instead of signing it, I had to leave my thumbprint halfway across my photograph and onto the sheet of paper, so it couldn't be duplicated in any way. That's what an actual certificate will have on it for future reference. I was married to a Middle Eastern man who was Muslim for quite some time. In total, we were together for 14 years. Now, it so happens that when I met this man, he was already in a relationship of some 3 years, but neglected to tell me. Now, obviously, when I found out, that would have been a very, very, very good indicator of things to come, because I am of the belief that once a cheater, always a cheater, and the only reason some people do not cheat is lack of opportunity. And I may or may not be implying something about a certain someone by saying that. Lack of opportunity might be the reason somebody is being faithful, and not because they actually changed their ways. I forgot to add that by the time I found out, I was fully committed, absolutely, hand on heart, completely in for the ride. And he promised me that he would leave her, which took another 2 years, oddly enough. His argument was she was psychopathic and kept threatening to kill herself if he left her, and that's why it was taking so long. I held my hands up. Absolutely. I was a fucking idiot. I should have known better. I should have ended it then and there. I have no explanation whatsoever. I'm a fucking idiot. Simple as. I digress. So, we were together for a total of 14 years. We were married for a good 7 years. And let's just say that I was not a trad wife. And Foodie knows she's not a trad wife, and I believe she's just kind of messing with us by saying that. This happened 2 years into our marriage. I had a toddler, and my time was entirely devoted to the child because I had absolutely no support and no help whatsoever. I mean, literally nothing. I was on 24/7. I did all day, and I was on duty at night as well. The time that was spent with my significant other was basically at the weekends, where he would take a couple of hours of his time and take us out to the park and then bugger off with his friends or whatever he was doing. Incidentally, it's worth noting he had his own business, and therefore his hours were wake up whenever I want to, go to work, come home roughly about midnight, maybe a little later if I've been hanging out with my mates, kind of expecting me to wake up especially to spend time with him, which, considering I was exhausted, was extremely difficult. Plus I hate having my sleep interrupted, but that's not the point. And I also was entirely in charge of keeping the house in order and clean and whatever. And it was quite a big apartment, and had it fallen beneath a certain standard, his disappointment and disapproval would actually be kind of scary. Again, I forgot to add, before we got married, he was actually living alone, away from his parents, which is kind of unusual in the Middle East, but still, he had his own place, and it was absolutely filthy. Filthy. It was thick with dust. And it wasn't a problem for him. His friends knew what his place was like. He had no problem inviting people over or whatever, because he was a bachelor. It was no shame. Once we were married, there was any dust and he knew somebody had come over and seen the dust. I was humiliating him. I was embarrassing him by the state of the house. So, yeah, it's the wife's job and she better do it. So I didn't dare, not do that as well. But obviously I did that while the child was asleep. So my sleeping was pretty shit. And in his words, not mine, I was a very good mother, but a really shit wife. He sat me down, and explained to me that he had met somebody who he was very interested in, but hadn't pursued any further, because he felt that if I started treating him better, that means making time for him, spending time with him, making him the centre of my universe and our child off to the side, because, and I will be completely honest with this, being a chronic people pleaser and also having self-esteem issues, which means I will assume I'm not good enough, I did make him, while we were dating, the absolute centre of my world. Again, what can I say? I'm a fucking idiot. Beyond work, beyond my social life, beyond anything. And he expected that to continue once we were married, which it would have had I not gotten pregnant. Pregnancy was not kind to me, and it was almost placebo. Psychosomatic, not placebo. Because the moment I found out I was pregnant, suddenly I was hit with extreme fatigue and nausea, and I was incapable of being social in any way, shape or form. And then obviously once my child was born, everything was focused on the child. Obviously the child can't do things for itself. I have to do things for the child. He wasn't doing anything. I think he changed one nappy once maybe. Well, needless to say, 3 months later, I hadn't started treating him better because my situation hadn't changed. I was still running an entire house by myself with no familial support from him or his family, because I was in a different country, my family wasn't there. Completely in charge of a child 24/7. No babysitters, no minders, no help. Nobody to help me with anything. So the situation didn't improve. I slept when I could. I was not going to wake up to spend some time with him when he came home at 1 a.m. in the morning. Especially as, at the time, my child was waking up at 5 a.m. So, he started having this affair. I found out that he had started because I saw a message on his phone, one of those really old Nokias that you couldn't break even if you tried, and basically it was her name and something in Arabic and then X's at the end. I'd like to point out this was on the little screen on the phone. I never went through his phone, never looked in his phone, didn't care to, really. By that point, I already knew the marriage was a load of shit and that I didn't want to be in it anyway. Yeah, it lasted significantly longer, but I actually literally couldn't get out. I was absolutely stuck. I left the very, very second I could. And that happened to be like 4 years later, unfortunately. So I asked him about it and he told me. He also said that most husbands wouldn't have told their wives about it at all or warned them beforehand, so that made him slightly less in the wrong, I guess. I believe wholeheartedly, 100%, with my absolute gut, brain, whatever, that this wasn't the only time. It was the only time he told me, and the other times, of which I believe there's at least 2, just went on. My husband had a theory that it was significantly worse for a woman to cheat on her husband than it was for a husband to cheat on his wife. Significantly. In fact, a wife cheating on her husband was unforgivable, whereas a husband cheating on his wife was because the wife wasn't providing the husband with everything that she needed. So basically, whatever way you looked at it, the wife was at fault. Now, my mother-in-law knew about this and sat me down to talk with me at one time about it, and I don't know how it came up, but still. And she basically said to me, and this is my mother-in-law, okay, my Middle Eastern mother-in-law, basically said it is men's nature, it's what they do. So basically, there is no need for me to be upset or whatever about it. It's just what men do. Men cheat. Men fornicate with other women outside of their marriage. And I suspect men do it anyway, even if their wives were providing absolutely everything for them. My husband had a friend who cheated on his wife in the first month of marrying her. The first month. Quite a few of his friends had affairs. According to my husband, I have absolutely no reason to disbelieve him. He loved to gossip. Oh yeah, and absolutely everybody knew about the affair because he took her everywhere because I was too busy at home with the baby to go out. So she went everywhere. He actually introduced her once to my child. That was the second time I lost my temper with him over the whole thing, was that he had actually introduced her to my child. Absolutely lost my absolute nut. I don't really have a lot to add to that. Also, and this is ironic, I'd gotten too skinny for him. Because I was doing everything for the baby and the house with no help, I lost 35 kilos in the 6 months after giving birth to my child and had got thin. And as a dedicated chubby chaser, he liked really fat women, and so I wasn't nearly as attractive to him. And the woman he had an affair with was rather large. It wasn't her only appealing features. She also made him the centre of her universe, so was that too. But yes, I thought you'd find that entertaining in a kind of irony kind of way, considering who else we're talking about. Now this leads me to Chantel and Salah. Salah will have been flirting over the phone, at the very least, with other women from the get-go. From the get-go. Because Foodie was never a romantic relationship. She was never seen through desired eyes. She was never and has never been lusted after by Salah. Therefore, Salah will by default automatically seek satisfaction elsewhere, because if he shares a similar mindset with my ex and his mother, then my wife doesn't provide, supply, fulfill all my needs and requirements, so it is my right to get them elsewhere. Particularly when you take into consideration that his needs are some that he probably doesn't have the balls or the guts or the death wish to want to actually express to Foodie, even if they were intimate, which I severely doubt, beyond initially because he kind of felt like he had to because of the money exchange. Now, Foodie doesn't have to accept this. She has, very obviously has, but if she has made some degree of peace with the fact that because she cannot, does not, and never has provided Salah, which is to provide for his every need, he will look elsewhere. And in a lot of respects, he probably feels it is his absolute right to do so. And I suspect he's made this quite clear, or relatively clear, to Foodie. Foodie has briefly mentioned, while talking about her friend, that her friend doesn't necessarily interact with her other in a way that certain red-blooded people require, due to it being physically exhausting, tiring, and them being almost too lazy. She used the word lazy, not me. So it's not a surprise that Salah cheats, because one, the relationship was never romantic in the first place, and secondly, there is a belief among certain individuals from the Middle East, men and women, that this is what men do. This is men's nature, and it is their right to seek what they desire and what their nature calls for outside of marriage, should it not be provided. And let's just add the caveat, bugger what God thinks, because obviously any God-fearing man, whether he has these desires or not, which are his nature, also knows that there is a higher power that really does not agree with this, which is what I mean when I say this is entirely cultural and has nothing at all, or very, very little, to do with Islam. I'd like to add that this mindset isn't only Middle Eastern. We've all met individuals in other countries. Well, I can only speak about the UK, but I've met individuals in the UK who have exactly the same philosophies. So it's not necessarily a Middle Eastern thought process or belief, but they are slightly less shy about expressing it in the Middle East. Secondly, on seeing the interaction between Salah and Chantel on the couples channel, I just want to say, what in the actual fuck? It's like two siblings below the age of 10 who have some sort of rivalry interacting with each other. Now, one, I am actually very concerned with Salah's behaviour. The way he behaves when he wins, the way he insists that Foodie does it in a way where she doesn't gain any advantage over him and might win. I think Salah is a bit of a absolute arsehole when he doesn't get his way, when it threatens his manhood. He seems quite aggressive in his gameplay, especially when they were doing the thumb war, which incidentally is physically impossible for Foodie to win against Salah. Physically impossible, regardless of what she does, whether she cheats or not. And yet his absolute insistence that she keeps her arm in a certain place and him putting her arm in a certain place quite forcefully, I actually found quite disturbing. Me again. It reminded me a lot of my ex-husband, who categorically would not let me win anything, and was quite aggressive about it, which incidentally, he was quite aggressive about everything, it turned out. Salah does not like to lose to a woman. My ADH brain should have planned this all out before I started, but no. All the ideas are coming now that I'm editing. Go figure. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Middle Eastern men and perceived threats on their masculinity, not just losing a game to a girl. One time I was walking down the street with my husband and my child, and a man on the back of a moped wolf whistled me and then stopped. My husband then went to beat the ever-living shit out of him. Not because he wolf whistled me per se, but because he dared do it while my husband, he was present and therefore didn't respect his masculinity by fearing him enough not to disrespect me in front of him, and therefore disrespecting him even more. I don't know if that made any sense, but basically the idea of somebody questioning his manhood and his masculinity in any way, shape or form was absolutely catastrophic. Absolutely. I was not allowed to touch my husband's bottom, just pat or anything, because it implied he was homosexual. I actually got shouted at for touching my own husband's bottom. Think about it. I'd also say he gets a bit of a kick out of humiliating or degrading her, which is also rather concerning. I would endeavour to say that they are both abusive arseholes, but there is definitely a very high level of toxicity between those two. I will now completely change the subject without mentioning that I'm changing the subject at all, which is very typical of me. The inability for one side of Foodie's mouth to move in synchronicity with the other side and to move as much is very, very concerning. However, whatever it is, Foodie, you need to get that checked out immediately. Either, and if this is on the side where you drag your leg as well, either you have actually had a mini stroke, or it is something that is definitely in the cards. And while we're at it, and I know Foodie is absolutely pulling our leg with this I'm a trad wife thing, because she knows she is not a trad wife, and she jests. And I think anybody who thinks she's serious about it needs to look again. But anyway, while the topic is being discussed, what is a trad wife? Well, a trad wife isn't this just stay-at-home mum person. A trad wife is somebody who forgoes all roles outside of the expected role of a housekeeper and mother and wife. Completely financially dependent on their husband, does all the housework, ensures the house is perfect for the husband, that the husband eats all the things he likes, that every one of his needs are catered, that she always looks pretty for him, is always available for him, hyper feminine, very floofy, does not make her own money. Therefore, you cannot be a trad wife and have a YouTube career, because it is the husband's role to be masculine and be an absolute provider. So Foodie knows that she's not a lot of these things and doesn't provide any of these things, even though Salah does no housework whatsoever. Foodie isn't providing the perfect environment for him either, and Salah isn't the breadwinner. Unless he was the only person bringing money into the home, none of their roles that they are currently performing would fit into that of a trad wife and, I guess, trad husband. I don't know what the term for the other side of it is. So that's a no, but Foodie knows that's a no. So